Let's look at it from this side. So the U.S. consulate talks about training for Nigerian journalists, especially ahead of the elections. Do you think that will help also in telling the stories as they ought to be told? Because sometimes some journalists, citizens journalists as well, also abuse the laws when they begin to tell stories without verifying the facts.
Well, I'm happy that you brought up this discussion, because the truth about it is ignorance of the law is not an excuse before the law. So if you know you're going to be, I think the primary responsibility of media houses, if they have employees as journalists, or even as citizen journalists who feel they have a desire, a compulsion, a passion to report on the electoral process, is that they should know the laws. They should know the Electoral Act. They should understand it very well, because that is the essence of what you'll be reporting on. You need to know the facts of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And that is where initiatives like you mentioned, where the training of journalists on electoral processes is key. Now, like I think like it has been said in several places, you cannot really expect a journalist who is not versed in covering elections, who maybe covers tourism, covers health sector, transportation, and you now throw him into the electoral process as they go and cover elections. I have covered elections. I covered elections 2011, even when I covered President then, General Muhammadu Buhari, in his village in Daura. I was there, so I've seen the process. I know exactly what can happen. I was assaulted and attacked even during the election by the army when I went to inquire about issues. So you also have to understand that. Then another thing is you need training and retraining for those who are already used to covering elections. As there are new inventions, new technology, they have to be kept abreast. And those who are not aware, we should be trained exactly to know what to expect and also how to conduct themselves in elections, where to be, where not to be, if there are protests, where to stand, where not to stand. It's a whole gamut of things that need to be done. And that is why whenever there's a conversation on our electoral process, that where the media also needs to be part of that conversation, so that there can be input from every quarter, from every stakeholder, every actor. Why? Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want a process that is fair, credible, and transparent. We want a process that doesn't lead to criminality, that doesn't lead to loss of lives, that doesn't lead to any form of issues that we'll now be asking ourselves, why are we in this particular predicament we're in? And that's what I would say all the time when it comes to electoral process. Journalists themselves need to understand that they can be targets, and they will be targets, so they need to know how to conduct themselves. On the issue of collecting money, brown envelope, and other things, like the chairman rightly said there, it's about integrity. And if there's a process to weed out those who are doing this, who are painting the industry black, who are tarnishing our image as media practitioners, they must not just be seen to be sanctioned, but they must actually be sanctioned. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to leadership. Leadership in all the sectors that are leading, that need the media to practice with them as partners in development. They need to understand that if there is any form of criminality that's been taken out or carried out on journalists, impunity especially, then everybody needs to understand that it's a stakeholder in the same process that is being affected. And a chain is as weak or as strong as a weakest link. So if you go after the media for reporting on electoral process, you're also tarnishing the electoral process. You're diminishing the credibility of the electoral process.
Okay. Dr. Akinwete, let me read this to the lawyer. Sorry. Tunde Arogunwati says, public interest, common good, national security are all interconnected and not mutually exclusive. Now says, a dysfunctional establishment that decides what is biased or unfair on basis of inordinate self-interest is in itself a major national liability. Larry wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the electoral process. Do you agree with Mr. Nkanga?
Well, it's absolutely okay. It's fine. His views were just quite in tandem with my view and the view of the union. But beyond talking about the role of journalists, I keep asking, we as journalists, first of all, we need to educate the politician in and outside government. That the question of if it's for public good that you want to serve the people, and then you lost an election, accept your fate. So, and we also need to agree that we must demonetize the electoral process in this country. And that's more reason why it's a question of, look, the stakes are extremely high, and people are ready to do anything to get there. But let it be a part-time assignment or issue or service. Then probably you can get analysis on people who believe that they are going to put their credibility on the line and their integrity. Stand by integrity and going for. And then that's also how we call independent candidates. It's actually important so that you don't tie yourself to the apple string of the pressures of political parties. It's important. And for us, a part of our role as media, as journalists, for the election, for these 20 elections, that we must also promote people with integrity. We must consciously dig them up, bring them up, and say, yes, you need to serve, you need to save this country. Because we all have a stake. But at the moment, the politicians that we have would do anything to, to make sure that their will are done. And that's why you have the clash with the journalists, who obviously has digged up so many things about, the leadership, and said, no, this cannot be. And then they are going to fight him very well to stand still. But again, let me just refer to, there's a documentary done by BBC, and I was just shocked. This issue of codeine that was banned. How is saying that journalists, Nigerian journalists, have not been doing all this, have not been writing about this? So when it takes, so a documentary from BBC, you now say you're not going to ban it. Which, of course, you are now saying that you don't respect us as journalists, what we are doing at home. I take exception to that. Well, they are our colleagues, but I've read stories about the dangers of codeine. Feature stories, ghost stories, balance stories. You never
Channel TV even did that.
Yeah, that is it. So why do we, that's as I said, we are doing play our own part. The society does not respect a journalist and does not protect a journalist. And the government is worst off. Because they look at others, it's a cat and mouse game. Oh, these guys want to expose our inadequacies. And so we also need to get at them.
But
so
why does it look like the journalists are always out to expose the inadequacies of government?
No. But
is it all about inadequacies? Are there no good sides that
we
can
do.
be reported?
What do we have? What do we also have what we call, media tour. During media tour, we go around to see what are the developments. They say you have done so and so. Let's see it. When we see it, then we'll probably say this is what you have done. But against what? Then we don't look at the variables. We look at the context of what you have done. That's why the problem lies. And so virtually, politicians don't want you to know how much they have spent for a project. Don't interrogate how much they have spent on the project. But just tell people that show the project that this is what they have done. They will take the exception to that. And that's why there's going to be conflict. Because by nature, we must interrogate every process.
Okay.
And so when you interrogate every process, honestly, you are going to get your hands burnt if you are not careful. Because the safety net is not just there for you. Your welfare is not also there. Then there is tendency for you, one way or the other, to be compromised if you are not careful, if you don't have integrity.